everybody. I'm Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. The aim of this podcast is to raise awareness about blindness, visual impairment, and disability in general, in a happy and light-hearted way. For those of you that don't know, I am blind. I was born with a condition called bilateral anophthalmia. Try spelling that one. It basically means that when I was born, my eyes didn't develop properly, so I wear prosthetics instead. The goal of this podcast is to remove some of the stigma and stereotypes around disabilities, whilst also having fun at the same time. Each week, I will be interviewing people from all walks of life, including some with hidden or physical disabilities like mine, and getting to know a little bit more about them and the lives they lead. In this episode, I am very excited to tell you that I will be talking to Ian Treherne, the blind photographer. My name is Evie Roberts, and this is my podcast, Talking in the Dark. Welcome. Hi Ian, how are you doing?
Yeah, hi Evie. Hey, yeah, I'm good. Not too bad. Not too bad. Been one of those days.
Has it? I mean, I was going to ask you kind of how's your day going and what have you been up to, but has it just kind of been one of those not the best, not the worst days?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to start off with a tough topic, I guess, but I guess that's why I'm here. But yeah, I think for me, I think why I've been having a bit of a hard time today is that I've been thinking a lot about my future, and um, it's kind of scary. I'm kind of a bit scared about my future. That's kind of why I'm feeling a little bit. I'm in an R-ing today, so just being a little bit unsure, and but I'm really excited to have a conversation with you, and that'd be lovely.
Well, I mean, first of all, it's such an honor to have you on the podcast, and I am super, super excited to get to talk to you. I mean, you have a very cool career, which I'm very excited to hear about. But on the topic of your day, I think it's being scared about the future is I think it's something we all go through at some point because I feel like it's kind of that fear of the unknown. Like, I think at some point we all want a crystal ball and to see what our future's going to hold and how it's going to happen. But because we don't have that, it's kind of that fear of the unknown and we don't know what our future's going to hold and it kind of scares us a little bit. But I think thinking about the future is a tough thing in itself. And I think being scared about that is something we can all relate to and have all gone through at some point. But it's definitely difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, when it revolves around deaf blindness, um, yeah, it's something that you can't really escape. So, it's something that I'm always thinking about. But you know, it's yeah, I'm not sure what it is. Maybe it's because I had a birthday last week. Maybe that's what it was, and I'm having having some debate with myself. I'm suddenly at the age of 47, and that's just quite shocking. It hasn't quite sunk in at all. So yeah, I think I'm still wrapping my head around that.
Yeah, I bet. I know that your eye condition is one that kind of gradually deteriorates over time, isn't it? And I think I am that must be quite a difficult thing to deal with. And I wonder, is it, I mean, please tell me to shut up if this is too far, like to ask, but was it kind of what you were thinking about of, I don't even know how to word this, but were your thoughts kind of about your eyesight deteriorating?
Yeah, I mean, I've been slowly losing my eyesight since, well, I was diagnosed when I was about 15 years old with RP type 2 Usher syndrome. So I was born profoundly deaf, and I thought that was going to be only major problem that I'm going to deal with in life. And then when I got to 15, suddenly I was, told that, I'm going to be slowly losing my eyesight. So kind of ever since I was 15, I've just been in a state of panic. Um, and that hasn't really changed. And I think, as the older as you get, your circumstances change. And, um, if you're lucky, you get to meet a partner and, have, um, somebody with you and, companionship and friendship. And, that does make your life, without a doubt, a bit easier. Unfortunately, I'm still single, so that is probably something I've been thinking about, why I'm a bit petrified about the future. And, my eyes are, getting worse. They have gotten worse over the last 30 odd years. It's like a continued state of deterioration. There's no, um, oh, right, this is where you're at. This is what your condition is. This is what you're going to have to contend with. It's not like that at all. It's a constant state of deterioration. So you're always in a state of grieving, grieving loss. Um, so yeah, it's quite a big thing to contend with in life, I guess. It's
Yeah, I bet. And I that must be super scary as well, because I guess you never get a break point then. Like
no,
you
that's right.
never it never kind of plateaus, I suppose. And I think that must be incredibly difficult as well. Like you say, you never get to a point where it stops, or it's not going to deteriorate any more than that. And so I imagine maybe there's quite a lot of anticipation there of, oh, well,
Always.
yeah, how much more can this deteriorate?
Yeah, I mean, like I say, since the age of 15, I've just been in a state of panic, really. And I guess that, you know, one of the reasons why I went into photography, sort of years later, even though I was always creative, um, when I was much younger, I was always into drawing, and I love um, silent movies because I didn't need to hear what they were saying. It was just a kind of a visual thing that I could see. um, so yeah, it's quite it's a big thing to deal with. And and obviously with social media, there's a lot of great stuff that's happening out there. But I do feel sometimes um, it's a very one-sided show. Um, and I don't mean that to sound terribly, because lots of great blind influences do great things. Um, but yeah, sometimes I still feel like that it's still only half the story being told. And the fact that I'm talking about this stuff right at the beginning, like all the heavy topics and the sort of stuff that most people probably don't really want to hear. They just want everyone to be super positive and happy, and everything's all wonderful. And the trouble is, I'm just too open and honest, depending how I'm feeling on the day. So
There is nothing wrong with being open and honest, honestly, especially on a platform like this where we kind of it's really important that you are, it's great that you are your true self, and there is no such thing as being too open and honest.
well,
And
I
I
don't know.
think
I think there is.
I don't I don't know. And you say that people don't want to hear about this stuff, but I think it's really great to talk about it. Although it's absolutely really difficult for you and a really hard thing to go through. I think that talking about this is a great way of doing what you were saying, sharing the other half of the story, because being blind isn't all good stuff and all positive stuff. And it's the same with any disability or anything in life. There are difficulties to it too. And we shouldn't just have to share the positive stuff. We need to talk about the negative stuff as well.
Yeah, yeah. Again, come, speaking as a man. Um, it's there's a lot of complex things that come with it. Um, I'm not sure how it is for the other side, I guess, but I can only speak from, a male perspective, and there's a lot of, tough stuff that comes with it. Pride plays a massive role, which is always a bit of a hindrance at times. Um, but I don't know. I guess that's why I do photography, because it's kind of the only thing that keeps me connected to the world. I think without photography, I would probably be, I don't know, probably quite lost. I think, it's quite literally photography has saved my life in a lot of ways. It's kept me going, kept me moving forward and doing things that um, I would never have thought was even possible. The fact that I did an exhibition with Canon and RNIB last year, and I had one of my pictures in Somerset House. I photographed a lady called Olivia Dean, who's like a blind influencer. She's got like a prosthetic eye, and I took her portrait, and her portrait's been sort of traveling around Europe touring with this exhibition. And it makes me smile because I think, my God, how did I manage to achieve that, from home? Um, it just makes me chuckle.
Absolutely. I mean, you have photography obviously has been such a big part of your life, and through that, you have achieved some incredible things. But I want to go right back to the beginning of that journey. Can you
Okay.
tell me about how you got into photography and what it was that sparked your interest?
I think it was, like I say, I was always into drawing when I was younger. I've always been a very creative person. Um, and that's something I did drawing and painting, um, for a long time in my sort of younger teenage years, I guess. And then I don't know, maybe becoming a teenager, got a little bit sidetracked a little bit. Um, but I was taking lots of photos with this really cheap camera. It was like a £10 camera, put a film in it, and you should press a button. It was really quite simple and basic. Um, and I was just obsessed with imagery, like collecting memories. Because like when you're told that, by a doctor that, at age 15 that you're going to go blind, I don't think it's something you ever really sort of get over. It's quite a big thing to, get told. So I had this sort of kind of weird, not weird, but a kind of obsession of collecting memories because, it was just going to be a matter of time, years, before I would see less of the world. So yeah, I kind of just got into photography that way, and like I say, the pictures weren't very artistic, or they were just snaps, which I still got to this day. Um, and I guess it was kind of a growing thing, really, because by that point I was really getting into films and movies. You got to remember this was like the 90s, so it was kind of had this era of movie making, indie filmmaking, lots of interesting actors and actresses that were about. So yeah, I really got heavily into film, and that was kind of how I sort of taught myself photography, was watching a lot of movies and studying the cinematography. Looking at the lighting and how things work, and I sort of try to apply that into my own photography. And a bit like what you were saying earlier about your podcasting, I was very much the same. I had all this passion, enthusiasm, but I had pretty much no idea what I was doing. I knew what I wanted to do. I could see it in my head. Um, and yeah, and sort of slowly over time, I decided to sort of teach myself the basic mechanics of um, how to use a camera, and it sort of grew from there. So really, it's been lots of different things, movies, learning about film, and getting into music and looking at vinyl imagery, and yeah, kind of like a collection of things that came together. And it's still like that today, really, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. I find it so interesting that you were mostly self-taught as well, because the amount of sort of dedication and motivation that must have gone into that is incredible. And like you say, looking at an attention to detail as well. I imagine that's such an important part of being a photographer. But studying all the lighting and cinematography and things like that of movies, I imagine you must have a great kind of attention to detail that was maybe learned through that process.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of sort of recently discovered that I'm neurodivergent, so I'm definitely on the spectrum with autism and ADHD. So that's kind of um, where a lot of that comes into play. So when you talk about attention to detail, yeah, that's something that I enjoy immensely, And I'll be honest, I wasn't a very good student at school. My attention span was incredibly short. Um, so I kind of find it a lot easier to teach myself and sort of learn, but mess up. Sort of learn by your mistakes. And then, we live in a world now. We've got Google at the tip of our fingers, and asked a question, and somebody gonna made a video about it. So it was just a much easier way for me to learn on the go rather than being in a classroom. I mean, classroom works for some people. It certainly doesn't really work for me. I need to be on the go, on the move, um, you know, doing something physically to be engaged.
Absolutely, yeah. I think everyone learns differently. No two people learn the same. And like you say, the kind of the way that schools do things definitely works for some people, and some people really thrive and do amazingly. And for others, they have slightly different ways. And they say there are three types of learner, but within those three main archetypes, there's so many different kind of subtypes within that because, everyone has slightly different ways of doing things.
Mm. Yeah, and to be honest, it was something I only really learned much later on in life. Um, yeah, I didn't feel great about my academic school life. I felt, pretty much a bit of a failure, really, and being in very low sets. I don't know if they still have them now, but they used to have
Yeah.
like set one, two, three, four, five.
Yeah.
Um, so you kind of sort of, you get a bit of an impression of, where you sit in the world and society by what set you're put in. So I was in pretty much, yeah, most of the low sets, to be honest. But it's weird because like when I left school, I enjoyed learning more because I think it was to do with being on my terms, um, which is still like that today. I love learning. I love, I'm still learning reading, and I love history, and um, yeah, I think when I was that age, I was just thinking about other things. But it's a shame. But like you say, everyone learns in a different way, and that's something that we know a lot more about now. We didn't really know that kind of stuff back in the 90s.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great that we do know more about that now. So I'm wondering then, obviously, you say you were self-taught, but how did you kind of, first of all, how did you kind of go from, like you say, the kind of cheaper camera you had when you were a teenager to the kind of more professional equipment you had now? And I'm wondering about how did opportunities in photography start for you? Were you kind of looking for them, or did they come to you in a way?
Um, bit of both, I think. Well, because it's such a layered story, really. Like it's years of lots of things building. But for a long time, I have to sort of mention that I hid my blindness. So when I was diagnosed, I didn't really tell too many people because I was embarrassed, and there's no such thing as a blind influencer. Um, Back then, they just didn't exist. Um, so I kind of kept my disability sort of hidden, and I kind of acted sighted for many, many years. Um, and I think it was probably when I went on the program, The Undateables, I got asked to go on there, and I was already a fan of the program, because I loved what they were doing. They were really forward thinking in what they were doing. Um, lots of people had very different opinions about it, but I could see what the program represented, and they were doing, talking about disability, ahead of most people nowadays. So anyway, I was a big fan of the program, and I went on there, and I thought, well, this could be my coming out as a blind person. I could just do it all in one go, and yeah, so I think it kind of sort of piqued people's interest, and yeah, from sort of that moment onwards, I started calling myself the blind photographer, which was a really big step for me because for a long time I was just a photographer, and because I was too embarrassed and ashamed of my disability, um, I suddenly had the courage to sort of call myself the blind photographer, and it seemed to um, caught a lot of people's attention because I kind of saw it as an opportunity, really, because I was thinking, well, calling yourself the blind photographer, I mean, that's going to hurt some people's brains, isn't it, for a start? So I thought, well, if it gets people talking and going, well, how does that even work, or is that even possible? So just sort of getting the conversation going, I found it really interesting, and it's kind of sort of been snowballing ever since, really.
Absolutely. I mean, it's definitely a kind of attention-catching title, isn't it? The blind photographer. Because I think it does make people do a bit of a double take in the way of, oh, well, how would this work? Like, I have to say, when I first discovered you and your work, when I saw blind photographer, even I went like for maybe half a second, went, wait, but like, and then went, oh, okay, this is really, really cool. And I imagine, that a lot of people have that same reaction. But what is it that you love about photography?
And I think like I say, it goes back to, like I say, that there's loads of little moments in my life that have happened, before my diagnosis and after my diagnosis, etc. But I remember being, I don't know, sort of 14 years old, and I used to go through these magazines. I think they used to be called Just 17 or something. I wanted to know what was going on in the world. Who's popular, who's not popular, who's famous, all that kind of stuff. And I remember seeing this picture of Kate Moss, um, and I think it was a photo done by a German photographer called Peter Lindbergh, who's a very well-known photographer. Um, and I just remember seeing that photo and just remember the feeling that it gave me. And I was thinking, I basically had been trying to encapsulate that in my work somehow. Um, because he did a lot of black and white photography generally. And I just remember just seeing how beautiful it was. It was a piece of art. Um, because like I say, I love art. I love the masters that done all these amazing work over the last many centuries. But I didn't know it was possible that you could do it through photography, and so I've kind of been honing my um, I don't know, my outlook and my ideas, and sort of trying to put that onto you know, into photography. But I think, like I say, also that obsession with wanting to collect as many memories as possible. You know, that's still something that I had still to this day, that um, I love seeing a finished image, because I probably should tell the listeners. So, because I know there's always this sort of discrepancy over the word blind, which is something I'm noticing quite a lot. So, for the listeners' sake, what I have visually is like no peripheral, you know, top, bottom, side. I basically have like a small central window in the middle. It's like a pinhole window. It's about 5%. So I've lost about 95% of my sight. So that's what I'm using to see through my camera and see through my lens. Um, and also, you know, I love photographing people. So, you know, there's that lovely connection that you can have, you know, meeting new people. And it's this sort of dance of energy between photographer and the sitter, and seeing what the results, you know, can be achieved. I mean, I'm pretty bossy and quite directive when I'm doing um you know, a photo shoot. So I kind of sort of take a leaf out of a film director's role, you know, sort of explaining things and trying to evoke emotion of some kind. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of, but it's just, I still get a buzz out of it. I still love seeing a great image being captured. You know, when you get the exposure right, you get all the lighting right, um, you know, the right look on the person's face, you know. Yeah, it's really exciting.
I suppose it's like a great form of human connection, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, especially now, I mean, you know, being this blind, you know, my world has changed a lot. You know, it's sort of gotten a bit smaller over the years, unfortunately. And so I deal with a lot of isolation, and that's, yeah, that's something I contend with a lot. So yeah, photographing people is something that is, you know, incredibly important to me. I mean, one of the people that I think you interviewed um, some years ago, Fern Cotton, you know,
Hmm.
she's somebody that, you know, I would love to photograph, you know, because I like her persona, I like what she represents, I like her spirit, you know, and she's a proper hippie girl, which is what, yeah, she's just a really cool person. Seems like a lovely person. Um, but yeah, I would love to photograph her. Hopefully one day.
That would be amazing. Yeah, she is incredibly cool and super lovely. I can attest to that, even though I didn't, she was one of my first guests and she is just as lovely as she seems. I really hope that you'll be able to photograph her at some point.
Yeah. Hello, phone. Get in contact.
Yeah, literally. Oh, that would be amazing. Like the collab of the century. So
Yeah.
speaking of, pieces of work and, things you'd like to do, can you tell me about some of your favorite pieces of work to date?
Gosh, I've got one of these brains that seems to have a terrible memory for some reason. Um, but yeah, I can. There's been a few things over the years that, you know, I've been really proud of, and um, you know, and like I said earlier, you know, it amazed me how I've even managed to achieve it. Um, but yeah, I think there's, you know, it's just over the last few years. I mean, I got to work with Rankin, who is a well-known British photographer. I did a job with him, and he basically mentored me. Um, And I was really nervous, like meeting him, because it's like, you know, meeting a very well-known photographer. He's like up there, sort of up with the greats. And can you imagine, what it's like, trying to keep your professional face on, and
Hmm.
but inside you're like, oh my God.
Yep.
I
Yep.
mean, but he was lovely. I learned a lot from him, in even though we might have not said lots of, exchanged lots of words, but I think there was this sort of connection of understanding, of each other's spirit and mind. And yeah, I took away a lot from that learning experience, just tips and ideas. And yeah, he's very inspirational. And then yeah, I got to photograph Eddie Simmons, Kadina Cox, and David Smith just before they went off to Tokyo during the pandemic. That was with Channel 4, and did this campaign. And I got to photograph the behind the scenes of the making of the other, the superhuman other. And yeah, that was such a cool job, really challenging. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of power athletes. I mean, I've been watching the Olympics since I was a kid, and I think that's kind of where I've gotten my mentality from, from people that play sports and that sort of commit themselves to this life, and putting everything into it, all the ups and downs, and the good stuff, the hardships. So yeah, I've learned a lot from the athletic people and para athletes. So that was a really cool job.
I mean, it definitely sounds like it. And I imagine there's been so many that, you know, so many works and things that you've done that you treasure. I'm wondering, obviously having limited sight, how do you take your photos? Are there any sort of adjustments or adaptations that you make?
No, not really. I mean, a lot of it is just, it all comes down to being prepared, planning ahead. Um, it's attention to detail, really. Um, but it's kind of weird, when a photograph, as soon as I'm looking through that lens and I'm focused on, the person in front of me, everything around me just completely disappears. Um, and that was like that when I did the ranking job, because there was all these people I, ranking sitting over there. I had all these clients, all these people, filming and stuff. And but because I can't see all that, I kind of just shut all that out, and I literally just hyper focus onto the subject. And yeah, and that's kind of how I managed to sort of, you know, take those photos. It's a lot of, because people sort of say, how do you see through the lens? And it's really a lot of scanning, up and down, left and right. I have to work insanely fast in a space of a few seconds, sorting out the settings on the camera to what the model is doing, the expression, is the lighting right. So I've got this kind of mad energy, um, which I think confuses people, because they kind of sort of look at me and go, this guy doesn't look blind and he's moving around not like a blind person. But I don't know, really. It's kind of, when you're, you know, living with a type of disability, I don't know, I'm always looking for solutions rather than looking at the problems. I'm a massive solution finder, and I think that's the reason how I've managed to achieve doing photography. Is just, setting up the camera, having a routine, um, So yeah, it kind of just makes my life a little bit easier. And plus, I like to keep my setup nice and simple. You know, I'm kind of known for using just like one light. I'm not really into lots of gadgets and gizmos, and the less stuff I have to think about, the better.
Absolutely, yeah. Simple but effective, I think. I mean, you've talked a fair bit about your session that you did with Chris Rankin, and I think like I mean, how important do you think that having those sort of mentors or idols is in this sort of industry?
Yeah, it's good. I mean, like Rankin's a very open-minded guy. He's always looking at new ideas. He's quite a forward-thinking guy, and I didn't just land this job. I was picked out of, between three people, um, and thankfully, he saw something in my work that he liked, and that was, kind of the reason why I got the job. So, it was really important to do, but I think at the same time, I think Rankin probably went home and sort of learned like what it was like to work with a blind photographer, because it's not a very common thing in the industry. So, but I'm kind of hoping one day that it will be just a normal thing. Um, and I think that's kind of what I'm trying to do with my photography. Is it's about breaking down barriers and stereotypes and old hat ideas. And could I get a lot of pleasure from hearing from other blind photographers, because I kind of know that they probably felt they weren't allowed to do it because of public perception, and because I'm a little bit rebellious. Um, I'm not very good being told what to do, so I kind of like to bend the rules a little bit. I like to push the boundaries on things, and I think that's why, when I decided to call myself the blind photographer, that I knew it was going to hurt some brains, and you know, but that was the whole point. It was about getting people talking, and going back to with people that I work with, to be approached by Apple, to take photos on their i15 mobile phone using all the accessibility features. It was amazing, and I was just so glad that they were interested. Because it sort of broadened the horizon. And as Rankin would say, the more people you bring to the table, the more ideas you're going to have. So,
Absolutely. I mean, that sounds incredible, and that must have been a super amazing experience. But speaking of being slightly rebellious, which I think you definitely have to be sometimes, and breaking down stereotypes, I would imagine that you receive quite a lot of kind of stereotypical responses and misconceptions about your career. So, do you have any ways of dealing with them?
I think I'm still figuring it out, if I'm honest. I mean, I came out as a blind person, what, I don't know, back in 2018, like properly. And it was a bit weird because as soon as I, started telling people that, you know, I'm 95% blind and all this kind of stuff, people did react very differently. Like people that were close to me, I guess, or not close to me around me, but just generally people kind of act very differently when you tell them that you're either vision impaired, blind, or whatever. So that's still something that I'm sort of working out my boundaries on, how much assistance I would want and how much independence I want to retain. Um, Independence to me is incredibly important, and it's not something that I'm it seems I'm not willing to give up very easily. Um, so yeah, it's kind of finding that happy balance between um, having help but still retaining your independent. It's very challenging inside. Um, Especially, I can't speak for anyone else, but as a man, there are a lot of complex stuff that goes on um, around that, and that was something I would love people to talk more about. Especially like around the white cane and stuff like that. You know, do you use a white cane?
I do. I've used a white cane since I was little. I'd love to get a guide dog when I'm older though, but there's no guarantee that I'll be able to for because we don't have any qualified habilitation specialists where I live. It's a whole thing. But like, yeah, at the minute I use a white cane. And yeah, there was definitely a period in my life, primary school for me, where I absolutely hated my white cane. When I say white, it was pink at the time, but um, because of course it was. But like I hated it. I just didn't I understood why I needed to use it,
Mm.
but I knew it separated me from everyone else. And
Mm.
so I just did not want to use it. And I don't think I could really articulate at that age or really even figure out that that's why I didn't want to use it. Like my brain couldn't even process that that's why, but I just knew I didn't want it. And then when I got
How old were you? If you don't
I
mind.
was very young. I was like, we're talking primary school, so probably up until I was about 11 or 12.
Uh,
I couldn't, I just didn't, yeah, it wasn't a thing. And then as I started to get into my teenage years, I was like, no, like this is going to improve my independence. And as I started to think about what life would be like and how I needed to be independent as I got older, I'm a lot more comfortable with it now. I mean, there are still some days where I really kind of wish that it wasn't there in a way, but I'm a lot more comfortable with it now than I was. And I think I can't speak for anyone else, but I imagine that's maybe something that other visually impaired people can kind of relate to.
yeah, I mean, I definitely found the white cane experience incredibly tough, and I did use it for a few years at the beginning, and even when learning to use it, and I absolutely hated every moment of it. And just like you said, you suddenly become aware that you're now separated from just regular society. You stand out. I mean, I'm an introverted person, so the last thing I need is something making me stand out in the public.
Hmm.
um, so yeah, and then sort of slowly over time, I started to use it less and less, which was a real shame, because I know that it would make my life easier, but I think my pride um, and probably lack of support, um, yeah, eventually just sort of just came to an end. I just stopped using it, which is a real shame. So, I mean, I'll probably a bit like yourself. I will eventually go to a guide dog at some point. Um, I have trained with guide dogs. They're amazing. Um, but currently I have two cats, so I'm kind of sort of waiting really. I don't want too many animals to be looking after. Um, I find it quite difficult, doing it this blind. Um, so yeah, but yeah, I'm always interested in the conversation around the white cane because a lot of people don't really talk about it, and when I do bring it up, people are like, "Oh yeah, this is how I feel about it," and I'm always quite surprised from the responses. Um, I sort of learned that a lot of people do hide their uncomfortableness and their pain inside. Um, but then I've met some people that use the white cane and they absolutely love it to the point where they got two. I know one lady used two white canes. I don't know how she does that, but It
Yeah.
seems to work for her. So, but yeah, I was told, um, by someone that yeah, it seemed to be quite a common thing that guys tend to not use the white cane. It yeah, this sort of subject, honestly, it would take me another hour to talk about it. It's really deep and complex.
That's interesting. I didn't actually know that guys tend to stay away from using the white cane, but that's super interesting. But yeah, it is a really complex and layered conversation, and one that I think, and it makes perfect sense, everyone feels so differently about.
Mm, yeah, and yeah, I do think it's something that probably should be spoken about. But maybe one day I'll be forced to use it. I don't know. It's something that I'm still figuring out. Um, as a blind person, I'm still figuring out all these, um, what to do, not what to do, and um, yeah, it's just been one long journey of sort of. See, I always avoid using this phrase because I get a lot of people telling me that this is what I should do. And as I said earlier on, I'm not very good at being told what to do. But people always tell me, oh, I just need to accept it and all that kind of stuff. And I just can't seem to accept it really. And I think I kind of see it as a weird positive thing because I think if I did accept it, I don't think I would try as hard or try and do as much. I think the holding on to the independence is what keeps me driven and pushing myself to go forward, if that makes sense. I think once you
Yeah.
kind of become too reliant or too dependent, I don't know. I can only speak for myself, but I just feel like I would give up a lot. That's why I can't come to terms with it. I can't accept fully. I understand what's happening. I know all the whys and the hows, and um, you know, um, but yeah,
Yeah, I think acceptance is a tricky one because I think I get why people say it, and I think there is an importance to accepting and coming to terms. But the duration of time that that takes is different for everyone, and some people may never. And I think for you, if the non-acceptance is what's driving you forward, then I get why you do it. And also, you will have, because you've been going blind for a number of years, you will have in a way come to terms with some of it.
yeah. I mean, you don't really have much of a choice. Like I recently spoke to a girl that was totally blind, and it was fascinating how we had totally different outlook on life. Um, she was born totally blind like yourself, and yeah, she really had a hard time understanding where I was coming from. And I sort of said, I think what it is I think when you're born with something, you have something, and then you lose that thing. That's what you're sort of dealing with, the just grieving and the loss of
Hmm.
things that you used to be able to do. And because I used to be able to drive, I used to be able to do lots of things, and there's many things that I just can't do,
Hmm.
which is incredibly frustrating. Um, and I always get people telling me, "Oh, you never know, there might be a cure next year." I get that a lot. I don't know if you do, but
Hmm.
you know, um, but I know there isn't going to be a cure next year. We're quite a long way off, and also because of my age, I don't think I would be a suitable candidate. Um, So it's quite interesting what fully sighted people sort of say. I get a lot of people asking me, "Oh, have you tried glasses, to improve um, your vision?"
Mm.
It's quite a common theme. But yeah, I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding revolving around blindness, because I think what has happened is how blind people are being portrayed in films. It's always been a very one generic idea, and unfortunately, that's how the world has been taught, and that's the only thing that they know. So I guess that's why I do what I do, is sort of, you know, confuse people a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely imagine. But I think that, everyone's journey is so, so different and everyone has different ways of coping with things. And I think each is unique to them and special to them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. There'll be loads of things that are, I'll come off this call and think, oh, I wish I said this, wish I said that. That always happens. There's always bits of information that I always forget to share. But yeah, it's kind of like you say, everyone's journey is different, and photography really is the thing that keeps me going, keeps me interested in life, and um, constantly, still learning about photography and being inspired by, um, photos, um, that will pique my interest and make me want to be a better photographer. Um, it's like I said, someone the other day, I still feel like an amateur. I've been doing it a fair while, but I still have that. I feel like an amateur feeling, which I take as a positive, because it's just keep me in the mindset that, I want to keep learning, you know, never get comfortable or too overconfident. 'Cause photography is so unpredictable sometimes, and it's where you really have to pull out all your years of experience in that moment. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's something, I mean, by the sounds of it, you are doing an incredible job. And it definitely doesn't sound like you're an amateur, but I imagine it's something that you kind of never really stop learning from. But I think you are doing an incredible job. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been such a pleasure to get to talk to you. I have so enjoyed hearing about you and your career. I think you're in a position where you have such a unique career and it's super interesting to hear about. So, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I have really enjoyed it and I hope you have too.
yeah, thank you for having me, Evie.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure and thank you so much to my audience for listening and I will see you all next time.